We're here today to announce how we will be using our federal CARES Act funding to support Oklahoma schools so they can open safely and teach students in person this fall. Schools are an essential part of our society. It is critically important that they operate safely and effectively for all students. Our kids cannot miss another year of school. From the beginning of the COVID pandemic, my first priority has always been to protect the health and lives of Oklahomans. I've been committed to making decisions based on the facts in the state of Oklahoma, on our data here in Oklahoma, and I want to share some of that data with you regarding our children returning safely to schools. The American Academy of Pediatrics has found COVID-19 appears to behave differently in young people than other respiratory viruses like the flu. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, children are less likely to be symptomatic or have severe cases of COVID-19 and may be less likely to spread this virus. In Oklahoma, just 1% of our COVID cases have been between the ages of 5 to 17. We've had less than 300 actually, hospitalizations in that age group, with one tragic, untimely death of a child. We certainly don't want to minimize any deaths at all, but it's important to point out that 2 school-age children have died this year alone from the current flu season, and 245 children have been hospitalized from the flu. I encourage our schools to take all the precautions necessary, like distance learning for children who are having underlying conditions that may put them at higher risk for COVID-19. But keeping schools closed for all students has many harmful consequences. You'll learn more about some of those other consequences from our DHS Director, Justin Brown, in just a second. 60% of Oklahoma students are qualified for free and reduced lunch, and many consume half of their calories for a day at school. Our child nutrition workers have done a great job of innovating, providing meals while schools have been closed, but we know that this is not a long-term sustainable strategy. The lack of in-person instruction also keeps students from accessing a variety of other mental health and social services, and it also widens the achievement gaps that existed before COVID across income levels and different races. These disparities can worsen and cause serious, hard-to-repair damage to the education of our kids. To make sure our students and teachers are protected as they return to in-person learning, I am proud to announce that we are committing $10 million from our CARES Act funding to supply Oklahoma schools with the PPE that they need for in-person instruction. Based on personal data requests from the State Department of Education, we will be providing 1.7 million reusable masks. That's 2 per teacher and 2 per student. 42,000 clear face shields, 1.2 million pairs of disposable gloves, and 1.2 million disposable gowns. We'll make these purchases as a state, which allows us to maximize our buying power and take advantage of our existing vendor relationships. PPE will be distributed through the Department of Emergency Management to regional warehouses where the different school districts can pick up their supplies. We will have additional details on the logistics in the coming days, but it's our goal and intent to get all the PPE out to the schools by August 14th. Additionally, I am signing an executive order today directing the State Health Department to work with the Department of Education to come up with a plan to test our teachers on a monthly basis. This plan will be in place by August 21st. As your governor, I am committed to providing our schools the resources and the support they need to safely open for in-person learning. I'd like to now introduce Representative Sherry Conley, a former teacher and administrator, to share why this is important. Representative Conley.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you for having me here today and for supporting Oklahoma students and teachers in this manner. I started my teaching career in the early 90s, and I've taught in rural, urban, and some suburban schools, and I've also been an administrator in Oklahoma City. As a 26-year educator, I understand what it means and the value of having students in the classroom with a teacher in front of them. There are other things that schools offer that are much more than just curriculum. Schools provide essential services. They're safe places where kids can feel loved, develop social and emotional skills, and are provided healthy meals that they may not get at home. If you have kids in school, you might be familiar with the term summer slide. According to the Northwest Evaluation Association, students lose 20% of their school year gains in reading and 27% of their school year gains in math. By 7th grade, students lose, on the average, 39% of their school year gains in reading and math. In the current circumstances, we know that many students have suffered even further learning losses when you add in the virtual ending to our school year of 1920. I was able to step away from the classroom to stay home with my 2 boys and while they were young. But the reality is, there are many parents, Oklahoma families, that do not have the option, that they do not have the option of stay-at-home parents to supervise their education. And some may not have the ability to give them the help they need in the classwork. Distance learning may be a perfectly acceptable option for some students, but it is not an equitable solution. That's why I'm proud to stand with Governor Stitt as we work to protect our teachers and students who are coming back into the classroom. Now, I'd like to turn it over to Katie Newcomb, a single mother, who is going to share her personal story. Katie?
Thank you. Hi, my name is Katie, and I have a son, Isaac. He's 9. He'll be going into the 4th grade. When COVID first happened and he was taken out of school, had I not had the support of my mother and my sister during that time, it would have been very hard for me to sustain any kind of stability for him. I was working, 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. I'm also pregnant, so I would get home and it would be very hard to try to get him around, see what he had done, as most of the things, there was a lot of things we couldn't actually see had he done them or not virtually. So it was difficult to know if he was getting the education that he needed. I also had a lot of worries about the social part of him not being in school, not being around a teacher. He does have some issues with math and speech. He was not able to be in a classroom, and I'm not, licensed to help him with those things. I also have some friends that it was a lot harder for them. They weren't able to have the family support that I had, and it made it very difficult. Some of them wondered, how they would feed their kids because they're at home constantly. They're not at school where they can eat, and they're having to take off of work because their kids are learning virtually. You can't leave your 9-year-old at home alone. So that's kind of my experience with the homeschooling. I'm hoping that this school year is good. Isaac is excited to go back to school, so we will see what happens. And I'm now going to turn this over to the Secretary of Human Services and Early Childhood Initiatives, Justin Brown.
Thank you, Katie. As Secretary of Human Services and Director of Oklahoma Department of Human Services, I have a front row seat to the impact of system closures on our communities. As important public health decisions are made, there's a real trade-off that impacts the most vulnerable Oklahomans. Today, the nation is wrestling with adverse social outcomes associated with the abrupt closing of institutional systems that have been created over the generations to support those most in need. While the public health emergency warranted swift response, the trade-off is beginning to present in some of our community partners across the state. Although early evidence is anecdotal, the community is seeing children and families present with potentially unprecedented levels of trauma. We're also beginning to get early actual data validating the impact of system closure. Domestic violence calls in Oklahoma City are 16.1% higher in June of 2020 than they were in the month of June of 2019. Feeding America and the Regional Food Bank of Oklahoma reported in their report called The Impact of Coronavirus on Food Insecurity, reported that childhood food insecurity in Oklahoma has increased from 1 in 4 children experiencing hunger to 1 in 3 as a result of COVID. In times of stress, we expect cases of child abuse and neglect to increase, much like the domestic violence cases that I reported a few minutes ago. But counterintuitively, the nation is struggling with the fact that actual reports of child abuse and neglect are down dramatically. Teachers play a critical role in recognizing abuse, and it's clear that our kids are not being seen by their teachers. In April of 2019, educators reported 767 cases of abuse and neglect to the Oklahoma Department of Human Services. In the same month of 2020, that number was 57. Hundreds of kids remain at home in unsafe conditions with nobody watching. I'm here today to raise the red flag that as public health decisions are made, and critical public health decisions are made, there are also critical trade-offs that impact the most vulnerable in our communities. And many times those impacts are disproportionate to low-income and minority communities, and we believe they are generational and devastating. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary Brown. On behalf of teachers and students at Dover Public Schools in Kingfisher County, I would also like to thank Governor Stitt and Superintendent Hoffmeister and the state of Oklahoma providing us with PPE and testing our teachers and students can feel protected as they return to the classroom. 86% of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch. Having the option to return to school in person is so important to us, because it allows us to give each of our students the education and support they deserve, regardless of their parents' income, access to technology, or family situation. In Dover, we offer 3 options, and I can tell you the option that we recommend is on-site learning. We also have an option of online, fully online, and also a blended option that allows students to take classes online but still participate in our athletics and activities. The support of the governor that is announced today will help each of our Dover Longhorns be protected against the virus as we start school this year. We've also, this summer, I've hired 2 reading specialists to catch up our students. Representative talked about that this morning. We have a lot to make up in our school systems this year. And our reading and math, it will slide, and it slid greatly. And so we've been proactive in hoping that we can bring those students back quickly of all the time that they've lost in school. But now I'd like to introduce Mr. Philip Obede from Crossover Preparatory Academy.
Thank you, Superintendent Thomas. My name is Philip Obode, and I'm the Executive Director of Crossover Preparatory Academy. Crossover Prep is a Christian all-male college prep school in North Tulsa. And our school offers a different approach for boys in North Tulsa, and it allows our students to work as teams and learn cooperatively with their peers. We have a strong student leadership culture that thrives when our kids are together in community. And we also empower our student leadership to be able to have a voice in how our school is run day to day. And some of our students come to us without a lot of positive male role models in their lives. And the relationships that they get to build with our mainly male staff won't be as strong in a virtual setting. And a lot of our students come to us not on track to graduate college or career ready. And we know that in person, our young men will learn faster. And so with our small class sizes and with proper PPE, we're really looking forward to providing our students with a great education this year. And I just want to echo the previous speakers and thank Governor Stitt for providing solutions to allow us to, to be in person, safely in person, and to allow us to continue our fight against the achievement gap that exists in our educational system.
Thank you so much to all of you for being here and sharing with us today. I think it's really important for Oklahomans to hear from us. I also want to thank Superintendent Joy Hoffmeister and the State Department of Education for partnering with us on a testing strategy for Oklahoma's teachers. You've heard from a number of people today how essential our schools are to our state, and I'm committed to supporting them and helping us to become a top 10 state when it comes to education. As we return to school, I want Oklahomans to remember that COVID-19 is still here, it's still in the United States, it's still in Oklahoma, and we need to take precautions to protect ourselves, our family, and the most vulnerable. Continue to wash our hands, watch your distance, stay 6 feet apart, and wear a mask when you can't social distance. We've been reopened in Oklahoma for 98 days. We started that reopening on April 24th, and we've been fully reopened since June 1st, a little over 2 months. Our kids have been playing youth sports, doing other activities throughout this entire summer. And online instruction does not reduce the chance of exposure outside the classroom. If schools do not open in person, it is not feasible to think that students and teachers will stay home and will not come in contact with anyone else. Again, I'm proud to announce our PPE and our testing assistance for our schools. I want to thank specifically Director Mark Gower with Emergency Management for the logistical support that they're helping to get this out and delivered to all of our different schools, to Superintendent Hoffmeister, and to all of our teachers across the state of Oklahoma who are ready and willing to step up and provide the essential in-person instruction our students need this coming year. So thanks for being able to do a few questions for myself or any of our panelists. Yes?
I guess a quick question on Superintendent Hoffmeister. Was she invited today? I know you mentioned you thanked her for help with the testing strategy, but was she invited to be here today?
Yes, she was.
We've heard a few plans already from school districts like Oklahoma City, Edmond. Oklahoma City, for example, is going to be virtual the first 9 weeks of class and keep an eye on the numbers. Do you think that was the right call given the current situation with COVID numbers?
Well, obviously, we're here talking about the benefits for in-person school. We need to take this, we need to provide, I love what the Dover superintendent was saying, that he's providing several different options for his students. I think that's the best way to do it. So we're keeping the most vulnerable safe and providing some online options, but also in person. We know there's consequences without having in person, so I would love to see every school district in person, but we believe in local decisions. And so that's why we're leaving that up to the local school boards that are elected and the superintendents that are elected and hired, and they have to make those decisions for their community. Yes, sir.
Governor, one question is a bit more on individual districts choosing how they reopen. Just one district in particular I'm thinking of. On Tuesday, Edmond Public Schools announced that they will be opening for a partial week with just only 2 days of the week, and they're doing so on the health department's recommendation, or actually the State Department of Education's recommendation, which is through the health department. So what do you think about those decisions to open partially or to not open at all, as we've seen it?
Well, I don't know exactly what they're talking about on the State Department's recommendation or the State Department of Education's recommendations, because the State Department was leaving that up to the local school districts.
It was the State Department of Education recommended based on county by county alert map that the health department put out. It has to do with just local infection rates. Should school districts be looking to open by any means necessary, or should they be following the infection rate?
I think specifically on Edmond, they are opening and giving some options to kids in school. I think they're doing an A and B. They're dividing everybody in A and B, and Monday, Tuesday. If that works for the local districts in Edmond, and they're going to answer to the students and the parents in Edmond, then we're going to be supportive of Edmond's decision on that. Dover has different situations. Hollis, Oklahoma has different situations. Jinx, Oklahoma has different situations. We're going to leave that up to the local school districts to decide. But we're trying to point out there are consequences to not having school and having kids in the classroom. And so it is my preference, I think it's everybody's preference, that kids are in the classroom learning from teachers. I certainly think that's the best for students. And we don't want our kids to miss another school year.
Governor, have you or your team or whoever wound up with the money that was announced the other day at 4:45 on Friday, some of the education dollars, have you figured out what the poverty thresholds for those applications are? You know what I'm talking about? We're talking about the money that individual parents can apply for their students. You know, there were 3 pots of money that were given out. Off the top of my head, I forget the name of the program. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep. We've got a guy in here that can answer that. You want to come up here and answer that?
Oh, look, there we go.
We'll go from 185% of the federal poverty level to 350% of the federal poverty level.
Meaning different programs have different thresholds?
Yeah, we'll open them up to the 185% first, and once, if that's not fulfilled, we'll open up to 350% of the federal poverty level.
Thank you very much.
And also there was monies there to provide iPads and learning material. Is that correct? Yeah.
Are you going to supply cleaning supplies to districts? I know that they're very concerned about getting things that can kill germs.
We haven't contemplated in this round of funding cleaning supplies at this point.
Switching gears a little bit, the letter from Representative Clyburn saying that you're ignoring recommendations on how to stop the spread here in Oklahoma, calling our situation dire. What is your response in none of those recommendations happening here in our state?
Well, I'm on calls every single week with the president, the vice president, 49 other governors, and we look at all the recommendations and we make decisions based on the facts here in Oklahoma. And that's when we rolled out our color-coded system to give counties some level of assurance where they're yellow, orange, or green. So we are taking recommendations very seriously. We're looking at the data, and we're making the best decisions based on the facts here in the state of Oklahoma. But there's not a...
That Oklahoma is in the red zone, but yet we don't have any red on that color-coded map. So are you saying that they are wrong?
Well, I'm saying that we look at those recommendations. We're on the calls with those guys every single week. That is what you're talking about. It's I think it's a subcommittee inside Congress that really is just trying to make a political statement either against the president or our state. I don't know exactly where it's coming from. But we've seen it, we're looking at it, we're going to reply, and we've been very transparent with our data. I'm so proud of Oklahomans. I believe we've done it the right way. From the very beginning, I issued 30 different executive orders. Right now, we have 647 people in the hospital, and we've built hospital capacity way above that. We currently are on this plateau. We're having between 700 to 1,100 cases per day. We've been on that range for the last 3 weeks. And again, I just keep reminding Oklahomans, we're fully reopened since for the last 2 months, and 98 days we started our reopening. And we've been on this plateau now for the last 3 weeks of number of cases. And we may be dealing with this and these numbers for the next year, 2 years until there is a vaccine. And I think Oklahomans are doing it the right way.
Governor Stitt, do you have a backup plan should you see infection rates spike in public schools or private schools? I mean, at what point do you decide perhaps in person is not the best option?
Well, we obviously, with our health department, we look at data every single day, and it's more about hospital capacity than anything. So some states are doing it differently, and that's the great thing about our country is you have some opportunities to look and judge and see how other states are doing it. There's states that are still completely shut down. They still have cases in their state. They still have way more deaths. Michigan, for example, is pretty much shut down. I think they have had 8,000 deaths. Oklahoma has a little over 500 right now. So we're watching the hospital capacity very closely, and if we see in a 14-day period, we would have to have about 2,500 cases per day for a 14-day sustained period before we would start going up to around 1,200 people in the hospital. So we would have some runway to start making adjustments back. Some of the recommendations that other states are doing would be bars closing down, would be reducing capacity in restaurants, in-person dining. So those are always triggers that we can pull. But again, we flattened the curve back in March and April, and if you remember, the epidemiologists were predicting 5,000 people in the hospital as early as April. It didn't happen. And so we flattened the curve, we started reopening, and we have not seen the spikes. And so we're in this period now that we're watching very, very closely, but I feel like we're on a plateau, and obviously we can make different decisions as if we see any kind of spike in our numbers.
Switching gears a bit, what is your plan to proceed on the tribal gaming compacts in light of the federal court decision?
You know, our attorneys are still looking at that, and I think Oklahomans know that I'm trying to get a better deal for Oklahoma. And with the McGirt case going on, there's some serious constitutional questions that we need to address as a state right now in eastern Oklahoma. And our attorneys are looking at all the options. And the interesting question we'd have to ask is did that horse racing commission that's unelected by anybody in the state of Oklahoma, did they know that they were renewing a contract for all 150 casinos for the next 15 years when they renewed a horse racing license? And that's what the federal judge said. So, but we're reviewing that, and we'll make the decisions. We've got 60 days to decide whether we're going to appeal that decision. Yes, ma'am.
Dover representative, you have less than 500 in the whole town. How many children are actually being in the district?
How many is exactly what, in school?
How many?
We have about 170 students in school. 170?
K-12.
K-12, pre-K to 12. You know, and another comment is that we think it's really important that decisions are made locally. If I have 0 cases, it's really important that my school board and administration make decisions on what's best for our staff and students. And, you know, we're very concerned, you know, of our teachers and our students. We would not want anything to happen, but also we're taking all the precautions. We got misters and gel, and I mean, we're spacing and rotating cafeterias. We're not in line. The food's going to be on the table. They'll come in and sit down. They'll be spaced out. So, you know, we're making all those precautions.
Provide hospital data, and some of the experts have recommended it would be better if it utilized regional hospital data. Do you have plans to switch over to a regional hospital data supply map?
I don't know exactly which map you're talking about, but we do, on my nightly COVID briefings, we have a regional map that shows us capacity by region, and then we have a transfer system in place that we need to, if we needed to move patients around for excess capacity, we have that in place as well. But we do look at the hospital capacity regionally as well as statewide, and if that data is not available, I can have the health department put that out there. We really, our whole goal, and we've had national folks talk to Oklahoma about how transparent we've been with our data, and so we will continue to push that out. I'm going to give Oklahomans the facts, and that's why we do that every single day, and we've been really transparent. But if it's not out there, we certainly have that, and we track it, and I can make that available.
One question, just to change the subject one more time. I would like to ask about the issues raised by the McGirt Supreme Court case and the civil and criminal issues that are being worked out. I believe it was last week or the week before, the Attorney General announced that there was an agreement in principle with the other tribes, and then almost immediately the Seminole and Muskogee Creek nations withdrew from that agreement. And when I talked to Muskogee Creek 2 days ago, they said there was no plan to meet with the state to further discuss that. Can you describe what is happening with that deal to settle those criminal and civil issues raised by McGirt?
Well, these are, as you know, these are federal issues. This is something Oklahomans need to understand. And I set up a commission on cooperative sovereignty, and you probably saw me release that. And I brought 10 Oklahomans together to learn what the facts are, and the charge was, let's figure out what McGirt means for the future of Oklahoma, and let's meet with the tribes, figure out what they think it means, and then let's let Oklahomans know what it means, and then let's let our federal delegation know what we think the fix is. Because we've been operating as a state since 1907 that there was not reservations. That's what, when we voted on our Constitution in 1907, we all agreed. The President of the United States at the time, Theodore Roosevelt, approved our Constitution, and we've been operating as that governs the laws of the state of Oklahoma. The McGirt case basically said that there's reservations that exist. So I have state agencies. I did an executive order, and I told every state agency they need to report what that means for their state agency, what it means for DHS by going in and removing kids from an abusive situation on a reservation because it's considered reservation now. What does it mean for tax policy? So we have the tax folks letting us know. What does it mean for Corporation Commission? Can they regulate how much the weight limits can be on vehicles driving now on our roads if they're reservations? So there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of questions that have to be solved, and we're in the fact-finding process right now. But it's something Oklahomans need to become more aware of. I would encourage the media to become more aware of it, to report what that means. And then the commission will be releasing a report and meeting with the federal delegation, because ultimately Congress has to fix this. We just need to know what the rules of the road are, because businesses need certainty. And if we want businesses to locate in Oklahoma, they have to know what the rules are to locate here. So for us to be and gain the potential to be the state we want to be, we have to learn what the rules are.